Steps into it. Pass is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable!
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal.
Touchdown! Kansas City! Damian Williams runs to immortality and will be remembered forever in the Chiefs' kingdom.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode, another season of Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, right here on KC Radio 97.7 FM. We're back again for another season every Sunday night, 10 p.m. I'll be here with you to discuss all the goings on in the land of American football, and I cannot wait. I had so much fun last year doing this with you guys, and here we are again, episode 1, and on the doorstep of a new season. Very, very exciting. The 102nd season of the National Football League, and the first to feature a 17-game regular season schedule, with, of course, the league expanding the regular season from 16 games to 17 in the off-season. So all in all, an 18-week regular season, 17 games, and a bye for everybody, and a little bit more football for all of us. You love to see it. We're back again. The crowds are back as well in full force. We really miss them in some parts of the US last season. We're all set to go now, though, for season 2021. It kicks off on Thursday night football, I should say, on Friday morning, Australian Eastern Standard Time. The Super Bowl champs, Tampa Bay, with the 44-year-old Tom Brady at quarterback, if you don't mind, take on the Dallas Cowboys in the league's kickoff game, with the Bucs playing in their home stadium, where they won the franchise's second Lombardi Trophy back in February. That seems like a long time ago, doesn't it, with everything that's happened in between, inside and outside the worlds of football. The season culminates this year, or next year, with Super Bowl 56 at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California on Monday, February 14, the 8th Super Bowl staged in the City of Angels, and the first since 1993. It was the Cowboys who knocked off the Buffalo Bills that season. So let's have a look, shall we, at all 32 teams as we head into season 2021. I'm going to follow the same plan as I did this time last year. I'll have a look at the AFC first, break it down by division by division, and then go over to the NFC and do the same. And at the end, I'll give my playoff predictions and predictions also for all the major awards, such as MVP and Rookies of the Year and that sort of thing. But let's get into it, starting with the AFC and starting with the AFC East, which is run by Buffalo. What a season for the Bills last year. 13-3, won the AFC East for the first time since 95, swept the division for the first time in franchise history, and advanced to their first AFC Championship game since 1993. Couldn't come up with the goods, unfortunately, against Kansas City that night, but all of that leads into what's probably the most anticipated season for the Bills since the early 1990s. So much improvement come from their quarterback, Josh Allen, in year 3. He improved his passer rating by more than 21 points from 2019 to 2020. He became the only quarterback, in NFL history with 4,500 passing yards, 35 passing touchdowns, and 5 rushing touchdowns in a single season. He actually had more offensive touchdowns last year, 46, than the average of the last 5 NFL MVPs, and of course didn't win the MVP last year, Josh Allen. The offense in total finished second behind only Kansas City. Has to fix the running game, though. It finished 20th. And in fact, Josh Allen actually had as many rushing touchdowns as the running backs combined on the roster, so they need to get better there. Also need to get better on defense. Their defense finished 14th, which is nothing to sneeze at, really. They allowed 7 points per game more in 2020 than they had the previous season. They allowed the third most points of any of the teams to play in the playoffs last season. Only Tennessee and Cleveland gave up more. Also have to get after the passer more. That's really where they fell down in the championship game. They did draft Gregory Rousseau in round 1 out of the University of Miami, and Boogie Basham as well in round 2 out of Wake Forest. So they know that they need to get back there. They know that they need to get better in their pass rush department if they're going to take that next step. 5 teams have made it to back-to-back AFC title games since the year 2000. I wonder if the Bills can do it again. I do think that they will win this division again, Buffalo. I do think that they are the best team in this division. I think there's a bit of a gap to the next team. What about the Miami Dolphins? Won 10 games last year, an improvement on 5 games over the previous season, 5 wins over in the previous season. In fact, they went 9-3 in their final 12 games to reach double-digit wins for the first time since 2016. They were the first team to miss the playoffs with 10 wins or more since the New York Jets in 2015. Incredibly unlucky, but they're on a rise. They're on the rise, I should say, under head coach Brian Flores. They're still kind of in the middle of a rebuild, yet they've already had some sort of success with a 10-win season last season. The defense, they finished 20th last year, 6th in average points per game, 1st in interceptions and takeaways overall. The offense, though, finished 22nd. The big thing here is going to be how much Tua Tagovailoa improves. Of course, he suffered that really bad hip injury late in his career at Alabama. Come in last year after being drafted early on and showed some good signs, struggled at times as well, but I think we can expect him to really sort of take a leap in his sophomore season, I suppose, if you will. They got better in the off-season with some additions. They added Will Fuller from Houston, who will be suspended, I think, for the first couple of games. One of only 4 players with at least 800 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns last year, Will Fuller. The others were Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, and DK Metcalf. They also drafted Jalen Waddle. So all of a sudden, they're starting to get some weapons around Tua. But of course, a lot of their improvement as a team this year will depend on how Tua Tagovailoa goes. But I think they're going to be a team that will be back in the playoff mix again. Miami with Tua there under center. New England, how about the Patriots? They actually cut Cam Newton last week. They've obviously seen enough from rookie Mac Jones to think that he can get them back on track at the quarterback position. They're coming off their first non-playoff season in 12 years, the Patriots. They finished 2020 with a losing record. First time since 2000 that happened. 7-9 they finished. They did have a lot of opt-outs, though, COVID opt-outs, you might remember. The offense overall finished 26th, averaged 146 rushing yards last season, which was the fourth most in the NFL, but they struggled in the passing game a little bit with Cam Newton. We'll see how that changes now with Mac Jones, who was the Patriots' first top 15 pick on offense in the Bill Belichick era. So not just the first quarterback that Bill has drafted, but the first offensive player that they've drafted within the first 15 picks. They also went heavy on the tight end position in free agency. Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, bought them both in. Julian Edelman retires. So this is a new look New England team, but I do think with the few players that they'll get back from the opt-outs, a lot of them on defense, including, of course, Dante Hightower, who is really the captain there on defense. I think New England, they're a bit of an unknown, but the one known is they're going to be coached well with Bill Belichick. Of course they will. The big unknown is with Mac Jones. We'll see how he goes. But I think New England, I expect them to be back in the playoff mix this season. The final team in the AFC East is the New York Jets, who finished with their second worst record in team history last year, 2-14. Sacked Adam Gase. In comes former San Francisco defensive coordinator Robert Saleh as the new head coach. They draft Zach Wilson with pick 2 overall. And in the preseason, Zach Wilson looked terrific. Have to wait and see what he looks like in the real stuff, of course, when he's got first string players coming at him trying to take his head off. But he showed some really good signs in the preseason, so I'm excited to see what he can do. The Jets' offense last year was bad. I've got all these stats to say how they were bad, but they were bad. I don't need to say anything more than that. They were really bad. Offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur spent the last 7 seasons on Kyle Shanahan's coaching staff at the Niners. He comes in to be the new offensive coordinator there at the Jets. On defense, how about this? The offense was bad when the defense that was thought of as the stronger unit on the team allowed basically 29 points per game. They'll get a couple of players back. CJ Mosley was injured and then opted out. They've also brought in a couple of big names in free agency, Carl Lawson and Sheldon Rankins, to play on the defensive line. Carl Lawson, though, he was injured in the preseason. A torn Achilles, I think, from memory, so that's a huge blow. I don't expect the Jets to improve much this year. They need to find out what they have with Zach Wilson. They expect to have their next guy, but we'll wait and see. And honestly, if that's the only thing that they find this year, that Zach Wilson is a good quarterback moving forward, then really this season will be a win for them. They're 23-57 over the last 5 seasons, which is the worst record in the NFL over that span. The Jets and the Bengals are actually the only teams below 500 since the start of 2016. So I do think for the Jets, unfortunately, it will be another long year for them. And I do think that they are the fourth best team in this division. Still, there's some work to do in New York for Gangrene. Moving to the AFC North, this is a much better division. This is a division, I think, with potentially three teams that could make the playoffs. Well, they had three teams make the playoffs last year, didn't they? Starting with Baltimore, who finished 11-5. They beat Tennessee 20-13 in the wild card round and then lost in the divisional round for the second straight year, this time losing to Buffalo. So where do they go from here, the Ravens? I wonder where they sit overall in the pecking order. This is a crucial season for them. And Lamar Jackson, who signed the fifth-year option back in April, it probably doesn't feel like it's going to be too long before he actually signs a contract, a long-term contract, but we wait and see what he does on the field first, Lamar Jackson, this season. That's why I'm saying it's such a make-or-break season. They lose J.K. Dobbins, who unfortunately did his knee in the preseason. You hate seeing injuries to such important players, but they've got a pretty deep backfield there, but J.K. Dobbins was going to be the number one guy. Him gone now is huge for them. And then on defense, they allowed 19 points per game in 2020, which was second only to the LA Rams. So this is a good defense, the number 2 scoring defense, and they've yielded 20 points per game or fewer in 4 consecutive seasons. They do, though, lose a couple of their pass rushers, Matt Judon, who actually signed with the Patriots, and Yannick Ngakoue as well. So we wait and see where they can find their pressure, the Ravens, on defense. This is a crucial season coming up in Charm City for the Baltimore Ravens, and I'm interested to see how they go. I still think that they are good enough, but they just seem to let themselves down in the playoffs, don't they? A good regular season team, not a great playoff team. What about Cincinnati? The Bengals doubled their win total from the previous season last year, but still finished with a 4-11-1 record. They enter a pretty important season as well. Third year now under head coach Zach Taylor, and they haven't exactly done a lot. Joe Burrow looked fantastic before he injured his knee. He's back, so that will help a lot. The offense overall finished 28th, 24th in points per game. They draft Jamar Chase. Joe Burrow comes back. A couple of reinforcements on the offensive line. The defense as well added a couple of players, including Trey Hendrickson from New Orleans, who had 13.5 sacks for the Saints last season. I think the Bengals only had 16 sacks or something, 17 sacks, in fact, as a team overall. So they've got better in some areas. There's a lot of excitement with Joe Burrow being back, but this is a competitive division, and I think you're going to have to win 9 or 10 games to probably even just finish second in this division. But they've got some talent here, the Bengals, and they are a team on the rise, but we need to wait and see how Burrow comes back from that devastating injury. Cleveland, onto the Cleveland Browns, 11-5, clinched their first winning season since 2007 last year, and their best since they were reactivated in 1999. They also ended the franchise record and league-high 18-year playoff drought, making it to the playoffs for the first time since 2002, and they absolutely did a number on the Pittsburgh Steelers. That game was over really inside the first 10 minutes. Baker Mayfield, his passer rating went from 78.8 in the disappointing 2019 campaign to 95.9 last year, and he chopped his interceptions from 21 in 2019 to just 8 last year. I think I think he's going to take that next step this year, Baker Mayfield. I've got a good feeling about him. So much of their success last year was down to their offensive line, which will return all 5 starters, and according to Pro Football Focus, they'll enter the 2021 campaign with the best unit in football. Nick Chubb is back. He signed to a massive payday in the off-season. The first player, Nick Chubb, with more than 1,000 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns while playing in 12 games or less in a season since Jim Taylor did it in 1960 for the Brownies. He's going to be a focal point of that offense, Nick Chubb. On defense, they allowed 26 points a game in 2020, which ranked 21st in the NFL. It was worse than all bar one playoff team. Myles Garrett is back, and Jadeveon Clowney is a big off-season signing who will be on the other side of the defensive line. So that could be one of the best, I think, defensive pairings in the league. Last year, the Browns were the 8th team in the Super Bowl era to break a playoff drought of at least 14 seasons. The previous 7 teams all missed the playoffs the following season. I don't think that will happen this year. I've got a really good feeling about Cleveland, and I'm high on them going into the season. The Browns have not made, though, the playoffs in consecutive seasons since a 5-season playoff streak in the late 80s. So history's not on their side, but This is a good football team. This is probably the best Cleveland team, I think, on paper in maybe 50 years, and they're probably the strongest team on paper in the American Football Conference. That's just my opinion. I'm high on the Browns this year. And in the final team in the AFC North, Pittsburgh opened the season, of course, infamously 11-0 last year, which was a franchise best. Lost 4 of their last 5 games to finish 12-4, and then had that humiliating loss to Cleveland in the Super Wildcard round. Pittsburgh had a plus 129 point differential through the first 12 weeks of the season, and then they lost they lost 5 of their last 6 games, including that postseason game. They have a 6-11 record in December/January over the last 3 seasons, so their finishes to seasons is actually becoming quite a concern. Of concern as well as the offensive line. They'll have 3 new starters. They had Maurkice Pouncey retire, the centre, and then in free agency, Matt Fieler and Alejandro Villanueva left as well, and the sudden release also of David DeCastro. So that's actually 4 starters from the offensive line last year that won't be there. They lose Bud Dupree on defense as well. I'm not really concerned about this defense. I think that will be the side of the ball that can hold up their end of the bargain. They've got the rookie on offense, Najee Harris, who I think is going to be one of the most important rookies in all of football this year. I really do feel like this is a season for Pittsburgh where it's one last go around with Big Ben. And I'm not sure if they're still in the window, to be completely honest. So that's my thoughts on all the teams in the AFC North and the AFC East. We'll take a little break and hear from some of our sponsors, and when I come back, I'll wrap up the AFC conference with a look at the AFC South and West divisions. That's when we return on Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on KC Radio 97.7 FM. Back soon. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on this Sunday evening on KC Radio 97.7 FM, the first Sunday night of the new season, I guess so. The preview show next Sunday night, of course, we'll be looking ahead to the first Monday morning. It's always a special Monday morning, isn't it, when you get up and you've got NFL coming out of your ear rolls. Cannot wait for that. But this is our preview show this week. I'm going through and giving my quick sort of snap thoughts on all 32 teams ahead of the new season. Before the break, I had a look at the AFC East and AFC North divisions, and in this segment I'm going to have a look at the last remaining couple of divisions in the AFC, beginning with the AFC South and beginning with Houston. Oh boy, there's a little bit to get to here. The Texans finished 4-12 last season. They moved on from head coach Bill O'Brien in October, who led the team to 4 division titles in his 6+ seasons with the team. They hired new head coach, 65-year-old David Culley. There's an elephant in the room here with the Houston, isn't it? And Deshaun Watson, the sad state of affairs that has led to the uncertainty around Deshaun Watson. Obviously, we're all aware of what's actually happened here. I don't know what this is going to look like moving forward, but I am prepared for an NFL season without Deshaun Watson in 2021. And what that means for Houston is, even with Deshaun Watson last year, who played out of his skin, they only won 4 games. So this is not a good football team with or without Deshaun Watson. Without Deshaun Watson, this might be a winless football team this year. Watson last season led the NFL with 4,823 passing yards, and he posted a career-high passer rating, 112.4. He set several franchise records last season, become the only player in NFL history with at least 100 passing touchdowns and 15 rushing touchdowns in his first 4 seasons. Overall, on offense, the Texans, they had franchise lows in scoring. Overall on defense, I should say, franchise lows in scoring and total defense, and they allowed more than 160 rushing yards per game, which is last in the NFL and worst in franchise history. They're changing their defensive scheme. They're going from 3-4 that they've had for the last few years to the Tampa 2 defense. So we'll see how that improves things, I suppose. There's not really much else to say here, unfortunately. If we don't see Deshaun Watson again, I think this could be a long climb back to the top for Houston. Remember, they haven't had any first-round draft picks for a handful of years. They traded away DeAndre Hopkins, you'll recall, and didn't get any first-round picks back for that trade. So this, I think this might be a long season for Houston, which is incredible. It wasn't that long ago the Houston Texans seemingly had the Chiefs on the ropes in the divisional round of the 2019 playoffs. Remember, they had I think it was a 20-0 lead late in that first quarter. So, I do think it might be a long road back for the Texans because they just haven't had the draft capital to accelerate a rebuild. But we wait and see. But I think if you're looking for a team to pick for the number one draft, have the number one draft pick next April, I think Houston have to be the odds-on favourites at the moment. Let's move on, shall we? Indianapolis, the Colts, they finished tied with Tennessee for the AFC South Division title last year, 11-5, but lost on the tiebreaker based on record versus the division opponents. They finished as the 7th seed, so they did get into the playoffs, but as a wild card. Lost to Buffalo in the wild card round. 27-24 was the final score in that game. Signed Philip Rivers. Phil Rivers, that still works. And he was one and done in Indy. Didn't quite pan out how they would have liked. And now coming in is the reclamation project, Carson Wentz, who, talk about a flame out, absolutely flamed out in Philadelphia. The Colts, they're going into head coach Frank Reich's 4th season with a 4th different quarterback, can you believe? But one with whom the head coach is very familiar with, considering they spent, Reich and Wentz, that is, a magical 2017 season together in Philadelphia. That was the season the Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl, and Carson Wentz really got them in a position to go on with things before he, of course, did his knee. Very interested to see what happens here with Carson Wentz in Indianapolis. Of course, he'll be playing behind an offensive line that is considerably better than the one that he played behind at Philadelphia, particularly last season. The offensive line in Philly was ravaged with injuries. They had their left tackle, Anthony Costanzo, retired, replaced him with Eric Fisher, who was cut by Kansas City, but he tore his Achilles late last season, so we probably won't see Eric Fisher there for a little while. The defense is the side of the ball that can make some noise, though. They allowed nearly 22 points per game in weeks 13 to 17 last year, and opened the season allowing only 14 points in the first 4 weeks. So that's the strong side of the ball here for Indianapolis. And Jonathan Taylor, the running back, will be looking to go on with things after a fantastic rookie season. One of just 4 players with 1,400 or more scrimmage yards and at least 12 scrimmage touchdowns. The others last year, Derrick Henry, Delvin Cook, and Alvin Kamara. So he's going to be a very important player as well. They will get Marlon Mack back, of course, to the Colts. So they've got a good offensive line. They don't really have a whole lot of weapons outside the 2 running backs, but a good defense. So there's enough here. There's enough here for Indianapolis to make the playoffs again and see what they can do when they make it. But a lot really does hinge on what happens at the quarterback position, doesn't it? We'll move on to Jacksonville now, who won in week 1 against Indianapolis last year and then lost their final 15 games in a row. They were the 4th team in NFL history to actually lose 15 or more consecutive games in a single season. So that's a feat in and of itself, isn't it? Urban Meyer comes in as head coach, Trent Baalke as GM. Urban Meyer brings in coordinators Darrell Bevel for the offense and Joe Cullen for the defense. And of course, the big name is Trevor Lawrence, who they got from Clemson with pick 1. The interesting thing here is Urban Meyer, who comes to the league with no NFL coaching experience. We have seen guys come into the NFL from college who have had some experience before coaching at the NFL level. Urban Meyer is not one of them. Had great success at Ohio State, great success at the University of Florida, hasn't coached at NFL level before, so let's see how he goes. And he's going to have a young team as well. A talented team, but a team with a lot of young players. So we'll see how he goes. They drafted Trevor Lawrence with their first ever number 1 pick. Trevor Lawrence, who threw 90 passing touchdowns in his 3 seasons there at Clemson, which was tied for the most in college football over that span. He only lost 2 games in his career, including none in the regular season. So he's a winner, Trevor Lawrence. They drafted Travis Etienne as well, and of course it was a Liz Frank injury I think he did in the preseason, so he's done. So that's a bit of a gut punch. We won't see Travis Etienne this season, unfortunately. Only 5 teams have made the playoffs with a rookie quarterback and first-year head coach in the common draft era, so that's since 1967. The most recent to do that was Indianapolis with Andrew Luck and Chuck Pagano in 2012. So they'll have to go against history to get to the playoffs at Jacksonville, but I don't think they're without a shout. There is some talent on this team, and they have 5 potential players who could evolve into superstars this year. Trevor Lawrence, one of them. I included Travis Etienne there. We won't see him. But James Robinson, the other running back, and wide receivers DJ Chark and Laviska Shenault. So even though this is a team that still has some work to do, I think personally, to get back to the playoffs, they do have some talent here. So maybe keep an eye on Jacksonville. To Tennessee, who of course won the AFC South title for the first time last season since 2008. Disappointing loss, unfortunately, to Baltimore in the wildcard round, but they have made the playoffs in each of the last 2 years and, of course, played in the conference title game. They've got their quarterback in Ryan Tannehill. They've got maybe the best running back in the league in Derrick Henry. Defense really needs to get better. They ranked outside the top 20 in scoring, and they had the worst defense, actually, of all the teams in the playoffs last season. They gave up a lot of money to sign Bud Dupree, so he would want to come in and make a pretty big impression there. Julio Jones as well. They made a big move for him in the offseason, so he comes in to help out an offense that already has Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown, who's a terrific young wide receiver. I think Tennessee are the best team in this division by a fair way, so I think that they will win this division again, and I can see them winning maybe 12, 13, 14 games. This is a good football team, and they're going to be thereabouts in January again. So that's the AFC South. To the AFC West, and to the Denver Broncos first. They finished 5-11 and bottom of the competitive AFC West last year, decimated by injuries though. Cortland Sutton, the wide receiver, tore his ACL. Von Miller did an ankle as well. Those two actually missed a combined 31 games last season. This is the third season for head coach Vic Fangio and quarterback Drew Lock, but he is not the starter, Drew Lock. Teddy Bridgewater, of course, was announced as the starter during the week, so that's interesting. Teddy Bridgewater, 1 year in Carolina, comes over to Denver and beats out Drew Lock for the quarterback position. So I wonder what that says about Drew Lock going forward. Offense overall finished 23rd in average yards per game, 26th in passing yards per game, and 28th in points per game. The defense will be good again. They have been for a little while. They allowed 28 points a game in 2020, though, which was the 25th in the NFL, and that was actually the worst ranking for Fangio since he was the Texans defensive coordinator in 2005. On those injuries, they'll get Von Miller back, and they compare him with Bradley Chubb on that defense. Those two guys have actually only played 4 games together out of a possible 32, so I really like this defense. They drafted Patrick Surtain as well out of Alabama, the cornerback. There's enough on this defense, I think, to really worry some teams. The issue is I think there's 3 teams better than them in the division, and we're going to get to them now, but they'll be tough to beat at home again, as they normally are, but I don't think they're in playoff contention, unfortunately, this season, Denver. This team is Kansas City, 14-2 last season, won the division for the 5th consecutive year, won back-to-back AFC championships, first time in team history, got back to the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, they really unraveled and lost to Tampa Bay 31-9. It was a pretty comprehensive belting, actually, really, in the end. In the Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes was pressured 16 times with 4 or fewer rushes, which means not a blitz in that game. So they set about fixing the offensive line. They got rid of Eric Fisher and they got rid of Mitch Schwartz, who, remember, was the all-pro right tackle only a couple of seasons ago. What that means is it looks like their offensive line, their starting 5 next season, from the center all the way to right tackle, is effectively going to be rookies. Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma at center, who they drafted, I think, in round 2 from memory. At right guard, Trey Smith, a rookie out of Tennessee, who I think they drafted out in round 3. And at right tackle, Lucas Niang, who is actually a second-year player out of TCU, but actually opted out last season. He was one of the COVID opt-outs. So effectively, from center to right tackle, really, for all intents and purposes, all rookies. So we'll see how they go with the offensive line makeover. Any team that will have Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce is going to put up some points. So I don't have any concerns really about Kansas City. One more thing on Patrick Mahomes before I move on to the Las Vegas Raiders. He was the 5th quarterback in NFL history last year with at least 14 wins and 300 passing yards per game in a season. The other 3, Aaron Rodgers in 2011, Tom Brady in 2007, and Kurt Warner in 2001, and Dan Marino in 1984. 4 guys before him. All of those dudes won the MVP in that season. Patrick Mahomes didn't win the MVP last year. you probably should have. Kansas City will be thereabouts again. I think they're the best team in the AFC, and we'll see that again in season 2021. The Raiders last year, despite a 6-3 start with wins against the Chiefs, Saints, and the Browns, all of whom went on to play in the playoffs, they suffered a late season collapse again, second consecutive year that has happened. Really, it all come about after a really devastating loss to the Dolphins in Week 16. This is an important season, third year under John Gruden, one of 14 coaches to coach the same franchise since 2018. He's the only one of those who hasn't made the playoffs. Derek Carr, they've got their quarterback. He's one of 3 quarterbacks with 4,000 passing yards and a passer rating over 100 in both 29 and 2020. The other two were Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson. So they've got their quarterback. The issue is the defense. Here's how the defense for the Raiders has ranked in every season with Derek Carr at quarterback. In 2014, his rookie season, last. 2015, 22nd. 2016, 20th. That's as high as they've got. 2017, 20th as well. 2018, last. 2019, 24th. Last year, 30th. They've got to get better on defense, the Raiders. They've got enough pieces here. Good offensive line, although they've swapped a few players out. Another team that's done that. Decent weapons. Josh Jacobs is a good running back. Derek Carr is a good quarterback. Got to get better on defense. Got to get better on defense this season, the Raiders, if they're any chance to make the playoffs. And then finally, the LA Chargers, a team who I am very, very high on this season. They finished 7-9, winning their last 4 games after being eliminated from the postseason throughout the middle part of the season. Highlighted by a string of blown fourth quarter leads. 8 of their 9 losses were by a deficit of 10 points or less. Last season, that led to the firing of head coach Anthony Lynn. Former Rams defensive coordinator Brandon Staley comes in to take over. Really, the biggest takeaway from the season was Justin Herbert. They've found their quarterback. He set a rookie record with 31 touchdown passes, 1 offensive rookie of the year, of course. They have their guy. They've gone about trying to fix the offensive line, which have the 3rd worst pass blocking grade according to Pro Football Focus last year, 54.5, and the worst blocking grade, I'll get that out, run blocking grade, 46.5. They bring in Corey Linsley from the Packers, who was the All-Pro center last year, and they drafted Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern as well, so they know they have to get better there. They'll get Derwin James back on defense. This is a good football team. On paper, this is a magnificent football team. They just need to get better in those close games and stop finding ways to lose those close games. They need a bit more, they need a culture shift. They need an increase in their sort of culture and their attention to detail. They're the things that have sort of let the Chargers down in recent years, and I think Brandon Staley will be the guy to do it. I think the LA Chargers make the Super Bowl, maybe make the playoffs this year. I think they are the wild card. They are the dark horse in the AFC. Just quickly, my playoff teams in the AFC. I've run through all four divisions now. I think the winners will be Buffalo in the East. I think Baltimore in the AFC North. In the South, Tennessee. That's the one I'm most confident about. And the Chiefs in the AFC West. And I think the 3 playoff teams will be Miami. It's their turn to make it this year. I think Cleveland will get in, and I do think the LA Chargers will get in. So I've got the Patriots not making it, the Steelers missing out, and a couple of other good teams missing out as well. This is a top-heavy conference. This is the more competitive conference, I think, of the 2. So they're my 7 playoff teams in the AFC. Let's step out and hear from our sponsors again, and when I come back, I'll turn my attention to the National Football Conference, which is, of course, the conference that houses the reigning Super Bowl champions. I'll go through the NFC when we return. You listen to Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on KC Radio 97.7 FM. Back soon. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on this Sunday evening here on KC Radio 97.7 FM, the preview show where I'm going through and giving my sort of snap thoughts on all 32 teams ahead of the season, kicking off next weekend. Before the break, I wrapped up the American Football Conference and went through and predicted my 7 playoff teams, and now I'm going to turn my attention to the NFC, starting with the worst division in football last year. This division was just awful, beginning with the Dallas Cowboys, who would have won this division in a canter if not for all the injuries that they suffered, most notably, of course, the quarterback Dak Prescott, who suffered a compound fracture and dislocation to his ankle in the Week 5 win over the Giants. Overall, they finished 6-10 in the first season under head coach Mike McCarthy. That was their first losing season, actually, the Cowboys, since 2015. So they had been on, a half sort of decent run. On Dak Prescott, in the first 4 games of 2020, threw for 1,690 yards at a clip over 422 yards per game on average, meaning he was actually on pace to finish with well over 5,000 yards if he hadn't been injured. Although it is worth noting the Cowboys went 1-3 in those 4 games when Dak Prescott was healthy. Also smashed with injuries on the offensive line. Zach Martin he missed 6 games. Lyle Collins missed the whole year. Tyron Smith, the left tackle, missed 14 games. Consequently, the Cowboys fell to 27th in Pro Football Focus's offensive line rankings after finishing the year before 2019 in 4th place. That should get better with a bit more luck, you would think. One of the better offensive lines of the last decade. The Cowboys, the defense is where they really need to get better. Finished 23rd in total yards per game, 31st in rushing yards per game, 28th in points per game. Former Falcons head coach Dan Quinn comes in as Mike McCarthy's new defensive coordinator, replacing Mike Nolan. The big question is, Dak is back. How does he go after that horrendous injury that he suffered? Gruesome, really. Obviously, the Cowboys mustn't think that he'll be suffering any long-term effects from that. They signed him to a $160 million contract this offseason. The time is now for the Cowboys. They got a bit of a lifeline, I suppose. Well, not a lifeline, but they got the benefit of the doubt last year because of the injuries. This is a team that has everything they need on offense to go deep into the playoffs. The defense needs to get better. They've added some pieces. Micah Parsons, the rookie from Penn State at linebacker. Dak Prescott comes back and will hopefully play a whole season. The time is now for the Cowboys to rock and roll. They are the best team in this division. It's not even close. They are the best team. They must win this division, win it comfortably, and go into the playoffs with some sort of form and momentum. There's no excuses for the Cowboys this year. Moving on to the New York Giants, 6-10 in their first season under Joe Judge, failed to make the playoffs for the 4th consecutive year. Of course, remember, they needed Philadelphia to beat Washington, and the Giants would have gone in to the playoffs due to their head-to-head record, but Philly, of course, rested Jalen Hurts, and the rest didn't. The Giants love that. 3rd season for quarterback Daniel Jones. He's probably the one young quarterback in the league who goes into this season with the most pressure. It's a make-or-break season, really, for Daniel Jones. He passed for fewer than 3,000 yards last year and only 11 touchdowns. That's almost impossible for a guy who started 14 games. He only missed 2 games at quarterback last year, and think about how the game is played, and he only threw 11 touchdowns. They were cruelled by an early season injury to Saquon Barkley as well. He will be back. They add Kenny Golladay, a wide receiver from Detroit, who struggled with injury as well last year, but he's a top 10 wide receiver in the league when he's healthy. Drafted Kadarius Toney also from the University of Florida in round 1. Defense actually started to turn a corner down the stretch last season, eventually finishing 12th overall. This defense is good. They don't really have a whole lot of big names on that defense, but it is a good defense, and they're going to need that to pop up this season and keep them in games, because I don't feel good about their offense going into season 2021. I think it could be another long season for the Giants. They'll probably finish around the 6-win mark again. I suspect they might be looking for a new quarterback going into season 2022, unfortunately. Philadelphia finished with a dismal 4-11-1 record, their worst season since 2012. Sacked their Super Bowl winning head coach Doug Peterson, replaced him with former Colts offensive coordinator Nick Sirianni. Quite a turnaround for a team that won the Super Bowl only 4 seasons ago. Carson Wentz, I mentioned him earlier, he flamed out. Jalen Hurts comes in and takes over. Didn't do too bad either. He led them to a win in his first game over the Saints at home, 24-21 winners there, before eventually infamously being benched in that final game. The defense needs a bit of help. They finished 19th in total yards per game, registered the 3rd most sacks with 49, but they finished 27th in completion percentage allowed and 28th in passer rating allowed. So the back end of the defense is where they have to get better. The offensive line was a liability as well, although they will get Brandon Brooks, right guard Brandon Brooks, and left tackle Andre Dillard back, who were lost to injury. I don't I don't think this is a great football team. And I suspect they might be looking for a quarterback as well. I want Jalen Hurts. He's a great story. I want him to succeed. But I think in the Eagles, you've got another team that will probably be picking at the pointy end of the draft again, unfortunately for them. And the last team in the division, Washington, this is actually a pretty good team as well. First year under Ron Rivera, last year they finished 7-9 and won the NFC East for the first time since 2015. Of course, they were only the third team in NFL history to win a division with a losing record and then lost in the wild card round to Tampa Bay. Offense is not great. They finished 30th overall, 25th in passing yards per game, 26th in rushing, and 25th in in points per game, average points per game. Ryan Fitzpatrick will be the quarterback this year after replacing comeback player of the year Alex Smith. Last year, they've got two budding superstars on offense in the running back Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin, and then this defense, Chase Young, led by Chase Young, defensive rookie of the year. This defense will give everybody problems that they play against, and that's a good enough formula, I think, to win some games. Defense, good running game, underrated offensive line. This is a good football team in the nation's capital, and I would not be surprised if they get into the playoffs again, albeit probably this time as a wildcard team. I can see them winning 10 games. You never know what you're going to get with Fitzpatrick. He can be a bit erratic, but I think they'll win some games this year again, Washington, and they will not be easy beats. I do, though, think Dallas will win the division. On to the NFC North, we'll have a look at Chicago first. They actually started the season really well, 5-1 last year, before finishing 8-8 for the second season in a row. Clinched a playoff spot via the tiebreaker that they had over Arizona. Fourth year now under head coach Matt Nagy, so another team that are entering a pretty pivotal season. He's taken them to the playoffs in 2 of the last 3 seasons, though, so he's got some runs on the board. They ranked 22nd or worse in points and yards in both 2019 and 2020, though. So got to sort out what they're doing there on offense. They do have Justin Fields, who they drafted in round 1. He sort of fell to them, Justin Fields, didn't he? But they've interestingly said that they're going to start Andy Dalton. I don't know about that. I think outside of the quarterback position, this is another team that's a pretty good team on paper. Okay offensive line, still a good enough defense. Some weapons around the quarterback, whoever's playing there, in David Montgomery, Allen Robinson, the wide receiver, Darnell Mooney was a good find as well. With Andy Dalton, they know what they're going to be, and that's going to be a competitive football team that's not going to win a playoff game. With Justin Fields, they don't know what they can be, and that's the exciting thing. There's no ceiling with what they can do with Justin Fields. I think the time will come at some point this year with Chicago where Justin Fields will come in. And I wonder if we might see a similar situation to what happened in LA with the Chargers last season, where they brought in Justin Herbert and they thought, oh, he's really good. We're in contention again. I think they're making a mistake starting Andy Dalton. Anyway, that's Chicago. Detroit, they finished 5-11 last year, last place in the NFC North for the 3rd consecutive season. A new head coach, Dan Campbell, replaces Matt Patricia. Matt Stafford, the quarterback, is gone as well, and they bring in Jared Goff. They had a draft pick where they could have brought in somebody, and they didn't. They went with Jared Goff. I'm not really sure that's an upgrade. This is a football team that is not great. They need help everywhere. Their offense finished 20th overall in yards per game and points per game, actually. They allowed just under 24, just under 24. Good offensive line. Offensive line is the strength of the team. Pro Football Focus has them 10th coming into the season, and they add Penei Sewell. Defense, not great. Had one of the worst seasons in NFL history last year, setting a franchise record for points allowed, 519, which is the 3rd worst in NFL history. And their yards allowed was also the 3rd worst in NFL history. Total yards allowed, 6,716. They were both marks that were worse than that 2008 team that didn't win a game. I think it might be another long season in Detroit. I can't see where they're going to win their games. I think the 3 teams in the division are better than them. This is not a talented football team. I think they could be a team finishing with another draft pick up the pointy end and looking for another quarterback. Green Bay, they've been in the news in the offseason, haven't they? With Aaron Rodgers, thought that he might leave and eventually he stays. Pretty good season. They finished 13-3, clinched both their 2nd consecutive playoff berth and the NFC North title. but again, lost at home in the NFC Championship game. What do they have to do to get over the hump, Packers? Matt LaFleur has had a great first couple of seasons as head coach, won 26 games in his first 2 seasons, and back-to-back trips to the NFC title game. Like I said, the 26 wins are the most of any Packers coach in the first 2 seasons, even more than the great Lombardi. So, we'll see. A lot of talk about Aaron Rodgers. Lesser franchises that would actually throw them off, but they always seem to be able to smooth that over. Reigning MVP as well, Aaron Rodgers. I honestly think the Packers will be fine. Their defense finished 9th in 2020, 13th in scoring. The defense has some playmakers. I think the Packers win this division again, and I think they go deep into the playoffs as well, with Aaron Jones there at running back, Dante Adams as well. This is still a good team, and I think they'll put all the Aaron Rodgers off-season saga behind them. And then wrapping up the NFC North is an interesting team in Minnesota. Finished 7-9 last year, their first losing season since 2014, third in the NFC North. They conceded 475 points during the season, which was the third highest total in franchise history, but they scored a lot. They managed to score 430 points, which is also the third best in team history. The 7th season under Mike Zimmer. In those 7 seasons, they've only logged 2 losing campaigns, so he's a good coach and they are a consistent team. He actually took them to, double-digit wins in 2015, 17 and 19, so they love the odd-numbered years, so that might be an omen for the Vikings. Still Kirk Cousins there at quarterback, threw for 4,000 yards, has thrown for 4,000 yards in 5 of his last 6 seasons. That's both at Minnesota and in the nation's capital. Justin Jefferson, what a find he was. Rookie record for receiving yards with 1,400. Delvin Cook had a great year as well. The defense will be boosted by the return of Daniil Hunter, who is the most underrated player in the whole of the National Football League. He'll make that defense better. They've changed a bit in the back end as well. Patrick Peterson, the veteran from Arizona, comes in to play at cornerback. Interesting season coming up for the Vikings. I think they'll be in the mix for the playoffs, but again, they're in sort of no man's land. They're not going to win the Super Bowl. They don't have the talent to win the Super Bowl. Kirk Cousins is not that great of a quarterback, with all due respect, but they are a team that have enough talent to certainly get to the playoffs. So that's a look at the NFC East and North. I'll wrap up with the final 2 divisions when we hear from some of our sponsors, and I'll give some of my main predictions as well, Super Bowl predictions and MVP and all that sort of stuff. That's when we return. I'm Talking American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg. You're listening to Casey Radio 97.7 FM. Back in a bit. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on Casey Radio 97.7 FM on this Sunday evening, where I'm going through and previewing all 32 teams ahead of the 2021 NFL season. I've got to get my skates on. I'm up against the clock here. We've got to get to the next program, and I'm going to have to jump into the 2-minute drill and race through these final 2 divisions before I then can get to my overall predictions and thoughts on the season. So let's have a look at the quickly NFC South and NFC West. Beginning in the NFC South with the Falcons, 4-12 last season, worst record since 2013. Dan Quinn gone as head coach. In comes Arthur Smith, the former offensive coordinator in Tennessee. The big news this offseason was that they traded away Julio Jones, who leaves as one of the great Atlanta Falcons skill position players. Great Falcons, full stop. So we won't get to see he and Kyle Pitts and Cal Ridley all play together. That's a little bit unfortunate. We won't get to see the band play one last time. Kyle Pitts, who I just mentioned in the first round, interesting to take a tight end with I think it was the 4th overall pick. That's an interesting selection, but the Falcons must think that they're still in the window, so we'll see. They're going around again with Matty Ryan. Offense finished 18th last year, 5th in passing, but 27th in rushing. They signed Mike Davis, who did have a great season for Carolina last year in replace of the injured Christian McCaffrey. The defense has been their issue for a little while, hasn't it? So they allowed 34 touchdown passes. That was the 3rd worst. The defense overall finished 29th. They only had 29 sacks as well, which was 23rd. There's too much talent on this Falcons roster for them to be picking inside the top 5 again on draft night. I don't know exactly where they go this season, the Falcons, but they can't be picking inside the top 5. They're better than that. They're far better than that. Carolina, first season under head coach Matt Rule last year, 5-11 they finished for the 2nd consecutive season. and their second consecutive season, third in the NFC South. Absent from the playoffs for the third consecutive season. Good competitive team, though, in 2020. The Panthers, 11 of their 16 games were decided by one possession. The issue was in those 11 games, they actually lost 8 of them. So they're another team that needs to start winning the close ones. Second season under Matt Rule, need to make progress. They've got Sam Darnold, who flamed out at the Jets, now comes to Carolina. Let's see if they can reinvent the former USC and Jets quarterback. Christian McCaffrey will be back from injury as well after missing all bar 3 games. The defense found some good guys on defense, didn't they? Including Jeremy Chin, who had, I think, back-to-back Rookie of the Year nominees last year. It was probably unlucky not to get her, although Chase Young was pretty special too. Derek Brown, defensive tackle, defensive end, Tua Gross-Matos as well. Offensive line ranked 30th by Pro Football Focus coming into this season, so they could get there. Could get better there, I should say. I expect this team to rise a little bit. I think they're on the way up, but I don't know if Sam Darnold is the long-term answer at quarterback, and I've been a Sam Darnold fan for a little while, so they're my thoughts on the Panthers. New Orleans, how about the Saints? 12-4 last season, clinched the NFC South title for the 4th consecutive season. They were actually the first NFC South member to sweep the division in its history. Last season, they beat the Bears in the wildcard round and then lost to Tampa Bay in the divisional round. Remember, they beat Tampa Bay twice in the regular season. Drew Brees, the greatest New Orleans Saint player probably that ever lived. Some might say Archie Manning, but Drew Brees won a Super Bowl and Archie Manning didn't. He's gone. Jameis Winston. Remember Jameis Winston? He will play quarterback this year. Last time we saw him, he was throwing 30 interceptions for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So he's got the nod over Taysom Hill. Michael Thomas, the wide receiver, has sort of gone missing in action, hasn't he? Led the NFL with 125 receptions in 2019, and then last year he only had 40 catches for 438 yards and no touchdowns. None. Not one for Michael Thomas. That's an issue. The defense wasn't. They finished number 4 last year. This was a defense that really started to get their act together at the pointy end, but they lose Trey Hendrickson, who had the most sacks of anyone on this team last year. I don't know about the Saints. I think this is still a very good team. Great offensive line, good defense, but Jameis Winston, has he learnt? Has he learned from his mistakes in Tampa Bay? We'll see, I suppose. And then Tampa Bay wrapping up the NFC South. What a season. Tom Brady comes in. They sort of went off the rails a little bit at the midway mark and then got hot at the right part of the season. Tom Brady takes them to their second ever Super Bowl in franchise history. And incredibly, they return all 22 starters this season. That was that's amazing. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I suppose we'll wait and see. I think they should be the favourites for this division. Of course, they were actually the first wildcard team to win the Super Bowl since the Packers in 2010, and they were the 7th wildcard team overall to win it in NFL history, and of course won it in their own stadium, the first team to do that. I don't think the Bucs are going anywhere. I think that they make the playoffs again, probably win the division. Can they repeat, though? In 2003, Tampa Bay finished 7-9 and failed to make the playoffs the season after they won the Super Bowl, let alone win it again. So we'll see. But there's no point looking at history when you've got Tom Brady as the quarterback. So that's the NFC South. To the last division, and by no means least, this is the best division in football, the NFC West, with Arizona, who finished 8-8 for the second season. In the second season under Cliff Kingsbury. Kyler Murray struggled with that shoulder down the stretch last season. That was really telling. They started 6-3 and then sort of went off the rails a little bit. Kyler Murray racked up 4,614 offensive yards in 2020, which was the 4th in the NFL. That shoulder injury really did hamper him. You could tell that he wasn't the same player throwing the football on the run down the stretch last season. They add AJ Green, the wide receiver from the Bengals, James Conner as well, and Rodney Hudson, the center from the Raiders, who Pro Football Focus has as the highest rated pass blocking center since 2016. So they have to get better on the offensive line, and they will with Big Rod. On defense, they had 48 sacks in 2020, which was tied for 4th in the NFL, but they lose their leading sack getter, Hassan Reddick, who had 12.5 sacks. They will get Chandler Jones back, though, which is huge for them. The Cardinals, they were 8-2 in games where they scored 24 or more points, and 0-6 when they scored less than 24 points last year. So That's a little bit of a barometer. When they score big, they win. When they don't score, they don't win. That's I guess that could be said for a lot of teams, couldn't it? I think Arizona will be on the cusp of playoffs this year. They could be a bit of a dark horse, I think, with Kyler Murray going into year 3. We'll wait and see. The LA Rams, I'm high on the Rams. I'm high on both teams in LA this season, but the Rams in particular, they finished 10-6 in their 4th season under Sean McVay, defeated the Seahawks 30-20 in the wild card round, and then lost to the Packers. Of course, they got atrocious quarterback play all season, really, and still managed to win 10 games. Detroit quarterback Matty Stafford comes in. Jared Goff is out. Stafford has the most, or tied for the most, quarterback wins, 74, and passing yards and passing touchdowns and game-winning drives of any quarterback that has never played in a Super Bowl. I wonder if that's a chance to maybe change this year. He battled his heart out for Detroit for all those years for no reward. So I don't know if Matt Stafford is necessarily going to get this team to where they think they can. But what I will say is he is a better quarterback than Jared Goff. That's what I will say. He's an upgrade on Jared Goff. The defense still has most of its pieces in place. It was the number 1 defense in the season last year with 18.5 points per game allowed, and in total defense as well. There's real excitement in Southern California for this football team, and so there should be. I think the Rams are going to go very, very well in the NFC this year. San Francisco, 6-10, bottom of the NFC West last year, but absolutely smashed with injuries. I think last year was just a complete write-off. They keep Jimmy Garoppolo, but draft a quarterback in Trey Lance. Very interesting there. I wonder who will end up playing for the most part this year. Jimmy Garoppolo will start next week. Similar to Chicago, I don't think it'll be too long before Trey Lance comes in. Defensive coordinator Robert Saleh is gone. Over the past 2 seasons, only 1 defense allowed fewer than 300 total yards per game, and that was the Niners defense under Robert Saleh. They'll get Nick Bosa back. They'll get a couple of other guys back. I think that the 49ers will bounce back, but they're in a competitive division, so let's see how they go. The 49ers, I do think they'll be back in the playoffs though. And then the final team, Seattle. Strange season for the Seahawks last year. First time in franchise history the Seahawks started 5-0 and then just completely unraveled. They did win the division, so it didn't completely unravel. They finished 12-4, but they were probably one of the weaker division winners in the NFL. Russell Wilson is back. He was another one that sort of was looked like he may not come back at some stage, having some issues with the franchise there. The people in the office upstairs. Perhaps the biggest surprise of all for the Seahawks last year, they were the only team in the league to not have a player test positive for COVID during the season. Remember, they had no fans there because the state of Washington was one of the hardest hit. So that was interesting. I don't feel good about the Seahawks this year. I think this could potentially be a season where it doesn't go well and Russell Wilson is playing somewhere else because he demands out. I don't mean to be a doomsday. I mean, nothing to do with Russell Wilson. He's a fantastic player, and really just having him will get them probably 7 or 8 wins. But I can the other 3 teams in the division I think will be better than they were last year. I don't necessarily think Seattle will be. So that's my thoughts on Seattle, the NFC West, and the NFC. The 7 teams that I think will make the playoffs. The 4 division winners I think will be Dallas, Green Bay in the North, I think Tampa Bay in the South, and I'm picking the LA Rams to win the division in the West. And the 3 wildcard teams will be Washington. I do think Washington will get in. I think Minnesota will get in. And I think the Atlanta Falcons will get in as well. So I only have 1 team getting in from the NFC West. I think I said a moment ago, I think the Niners will be back in the playoffs. I actually have second thoughts about that now because my predictions are the 3 wildcard teams there, Dallas, Minnesota, and Atlanta, and not San Francisco. It's the AFC is the top-heavy conference. I think it'll be a logjam in the middle of the NFC. So that's my preview for both conferences. Just quickly, I'm about to run out of time, gang, but here are my predictions for the key awards this season. I think Patrick Mahomes wins the MVP. Should have won it last year and didn't. Defensive Player of the Year will be Myles Garrett. He will come of age this season. Offensive Rookie of the Year, I think, will be Najee Harris, Pittsburgh running back. Defensive Rookie of the Year will be Micah Parsons for the Cowboys. Comeback Player of the Year will be Dak Prescott. I think he'll have a good season coming off the back of that horrible injury. The 2 championship games, I think we'll have Kansas City and Cleveland In the AFC, in the NFC, I've got the LA Rams and Green Bay. And the Super Bowl, I have Cleveland and Green Bay in the Super Bowl. So Cleveland to make their first ever Super Bowl in their first championship game since 1964. And I think the Packers will put everything behind them. Aaron Rodgers will go full A-Rod, full bad man. And he'll take the Packers to there. That'll be their 5th Lombardi Trophy winner over Cleveland. So they're my predictions, everybody. Thank you very much for listening. I've got to head off. We've got to get to the next program. I'll be back here next Sunday night, 10 p.m. to chew the fat on the first game of the season, the Cowboys and the Bucks, and look ahead to the first Monday morning of games as well. Hope you can join me then, everybody. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next Sunday night, 10 p.m. for some more Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg. Bye for now.